Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Kevin Bradley. Dr. Bradley, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dr. Cross. It's a pleasure to be here. I really am excited to be here.
Likewise, man. It's a pleasure having you here today. Dr. Bradley is the Director of Graduate Professional Development at Morgan State, and he's have been in education for 20 plus years. And that is really commendable, and which they talk about that there are not enough Black men in education. So you've been there for 20 plus years. That's really commendable. But before we get into the conversation itself, if you don't mind, if you want, please share more with the listeners about yourself and some of the other things that you have been doing so they can get to know you a little bit better before we start the conversation itself.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Dr. Cross. Again, name is Dr. Kevin Bradley. I am a husband, a father of three very different children, godfather to an amazing little girl, Ariel. And as you said earlier, I've been in higher ed for over 20 years. And in that time frame, I've done a lot of just different things as far as working with students to try to enhance the graduate student experience. And so a lot of what I do in my role at Morgan is to really make sure that our graduate students have all of the support that they need in order to help them from the time that they start their programs until the time that they end. And so that includes putting together workshops. I have a team of coaching fellows that work with me where we sit back and review all of the theses and dissertations. I'm the faculty or staff advisor to our Graduate Student Association. So for me, it's really important to make sure that our graduate students are seen. And my personal opinion is that I think our undergrad students get a lot of love. And I think there's sometimes this thought that graduate students, they have it all together. And so that's why the role was created, and that's a little bit about what I'm currently doing now at Morgan.
And thanks for sharing that. As you're right, when you're in undergrad, you get a lot of attention. But when you're in grad school, they may think, as you mentioned, that the students know it all or know everything they need to know. But you find yourself asking a lot of questions when you're in your graduate journey. So it's always good to have someone there who really cares and understand that, the need is still there, and that students are going to come and ask questions regardless of where they are on the journey or even how old the student is. So yes, sir. So we're going to get into the conversation today, which is really around what we can do as Black men. So my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One is that you have to have an intentional mindset. You have to say that on today, I am going to do better than I did yesterday. And then with that, having an intentional mindset also means that your purpose, you're saying, what kind of impact can I make in someone's life today? And trying to outdo yourself and making sure that you're being the best version of yourself that you can be, that you're there to show up and to really make sure that in whatever role that you're in, I just happen to be in higher ed, whether you're in engineering, whether you're an auto mechanic, whatever it is that you do, that you are intentional about on that day that you're going to show up and that you're going to make an impact in someone's life, because at all times, someone is watching you and they're watching the type of example that you are.
I really appreciate that perspective, being intentional or having that intentional mindset. And as you mentioned, it doesn't matter where you are. We need to be intentional and desire to be the best that we can be. So wherever we are giving our best every time. Because if we don't give our best, then it's like we are letting time pass and not making the impact that we're able to make or should be making if we don't focus on being the best version of ourselves or being intentional with how we think and our perspective on life. So I really appreciate that perspective and reminder to all of us and how being intentional is important when we're on this journey. So that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Very good question.
Thank you.
I think you probably have heard this said before, but you sort of want to be the change that you want to see happen. And by that, I mean that you want to make sure that your example must match what you're saying. We need to strive to be excellent. We need to take accountability. And if I am looking for things to change in my home, if I'm looking for things to change in my neighborhood, I have to sort of model what that looks like. A lot of times people are expecting other people to change and to be different. But what am I doing to really try to help foster that type of environment? And I think a lot of it starts with us doing some self-inventory, really stepping back and saying, okay, maybe there's some areas we need to step up in and really take acknowledgement of that. Is my home running the way that it needs to? Am I being the best example that I can be? In my case, for my wife, for my children, am I being the best example? Because a lot of times what happens is that we sometimes are wanting to do more outside of the home, but we really need to take care of some things inside the home first. Instead of trying to be great out there, let's be great in here first, and then let me be great with the people that live with me. Because a lot of times the people that live with us, they see the true us. And if we don't take that time to really work on ourselves, then we really can't be going out trying to make improvements outside of where we are.
And that's a valuable point that you make right there. That we need to look at ourselves first. As they always said, look at the man in the mirror.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're talking about the things that needs to be done, but sometimes we need to look at ourselves first. And
Mhm.
as you mentioned, that we need to model what we're trying to see happen out there, or what we want others to do. We need to be willing to model those characteristics, model the perspective, the mindset, the outlook, the disposition, whatever it is that
Mhm.
we want to see happen, we need to be models of the change that we want to see or what we expect from others. And that sometimes really take for us to really look at ourselves. And,
Yep.
and as Black
And
men,
I was gonna say, just to not to cut you off, I apologize for that. I was just gonna say that that sometimes can be painful.
correct.
When we start to look at ourselves and we realize, hey, guess what? Maybe I just am not as strong in this area as I would like to be, or maybe I've been giving off this wrong vibe, or just making people think that I'm more than what I am. Sometimes change is painful, and we have to acknowledge that there's a process. If we want to strive for greatness, we have to really allow God to allow us to go through that process of what that looks like, because it can be very painful, especially if you thought that you were operating one way and only to find out that you really haven't been operating the best way that you need to.
Well, that is true. And why I think it is hard for men sometimes to maybe have that acknowledgement of the change is that we grew up thinking that being vulnerable to those things that needs to be changed, it may comes off as weak, and we don't want other people to know that, what, maybe I need to work on that, and maybe I need to work on that. And that can
Mm.
be one of the barriers that sometimes may prevent us from making the progress that we want to make, or even make the impact that we want to make. And just listening to you talking about those things that Black men, we need to, just people on a whole, but being that the focus is on Black men, to make some adjustment and change, right? Where some Black men may not have the role models or the persons to hold them accountable or to help them to make that change, and that's where sometimes it can be really difficult. So what are your thoughts on that, like mentorship for Black men?
Well, I think that's an important piece, because to your point, there some Black men did not have father figures in their home, but it's finding that person that you can relate to. And sometimes for me, I've had wonderful pastors. My father has been in my life. He's an awesome role model. I have a lot of good friends that are role models as well. So I think what we have to try to do sometimes is we have to surround ourselves with like-minded individuals. And there's times that we as Black men, and just men period, we don't often ask for help sometimes when we need it. And I guess it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's that vulnerable place of we want to try to prove that we're macho and that we can handle this. But there's times that if we find someone that is really special, going up to them and asking them, would you be my mentor? Would you help me? And that can cover whether it's spiritually, academically, professionally, just finding someone that will hold us accountable, but that's someone that we can look up to, that really is going to help us in this journey that we're trying to get to. And I think we should be comfortable in the fact of asking people to be our mentors, because the reality of it is we can't get to the next level by ourselves. We need help. We have
Well,
to understand that as well.
yeah, and that is true, and that's one thing, as you mentioned, that as men we don't, as Black men especially, we don't like to ask for help, but it's to find that person that we can confide in and maybe trust to talk about the challenging areas. And sometimes, we can look for Black men that we see doing the work. Maybe they're in the same organization, maybe they're in the community, and maybe at our churches, just to ask for guidance. But sometimes what we have to do, we have to look for ourselves, because we may not have those people come to us to be our mentors. So we have to your point, maybe seek those mentors out based on the things that they're doing and the impact they're having, if it's aligned with what we want to do, and the changes that would want to see in our own lives and stuff like that. So I really appreciate that perspective, because I think it's important that if we want more out of life, we want to reach the next level, we have to try our best to learn from others, because no one knows everything. We all need to learn more from others, especially those who are before us, who may have to deal with some of the challenges that may be in front of us as we go forward. So that's a valuable
And even
point.
And I was going to say, even to add to that as well, is if we are asked to be a mentor, understanding the responsibility of what that is, and be willing to show our scars, be willing to share the mistakes that we made. Listen, the reality of it is that Superman is not real, right? And we don't have a cape, and we're not flying around, and we need to let people know, guess what? I made some mistakes. I made some I didn't do everything the correct way, because a lot of times people, they see us where we are, but they don't understand the journey. You have to share things in wisdom. You can't tell everybody everything.
Correct.
But you do need to sometimes let people know, hey, guess what? My head wasn't on straight. I wasn't thinking the best way. I didn't do some things the best way. And if I had to do it all over again, I would maybe go a different route. So we have to know how to mentor, to really let people know, I don't want you going down the same pathway as me. I see some greatness in you, and this is what I'm looking to do. And just be willing to share that with people.
I think that is important as we navigate our journey, to help others to navigate their own journey, by teaching them the mistakes that we have made and the lessons that we gain along the way. So that's important. And I think that's a great reminder. So that leads me to my next question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today?
I think it goes back to to our earlier question as far as taking accountability.
Correct.
We're in this time now. I won't give my age, but growing up in the 80s, growing up in the 90s, I think there was more accountability. We didn't pass the buck. If we didn't do something, we just took accountability for it. And I think now we have to get back to that. Guess what? If we fall short on something, take accountability and own up to it. If we're trying to change the narrative, we have to be consistent, which goes back to taking accountability. I think we sometimes people want passes on things, and they haven't been, they don't deserve passes. Sometimes you need to go back and call people for where they are. So I think really to change the narrative, we have to be accountable. We have to just really go back to being real, right? And letting people not think that we're more than what we are. Let's call it for what it is.
So, being that, as you mentioned, like back in earlier times, right, where we never used to pass the buck to others, we used to hold ourselves accountable. What do you
Mhm.
think caused this generation to not really want to be accountable? Because just listening to you, and which is something that I know, if we want to make progress, right, and if we want to make an impact, we really have to be accountable. We also have to hold those who say they're going to accountable. But what do you think caused this generation not to be as accountable as previous generations?
That's a great question. I will say, just my opinion, that it's been more, in my opinion, we're making people soft, and we're not holding people. I think what's happened over time is we've dumbed down a lot of things, whereas back in the day, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more. There was more of an understanding of where we were. We respected people's opinions a little bit more than what we do today,
Mhm.
and somewhere along the lines in the last 5 years, that's changed. You've got to think like me. I got to think like you. And if you don't, then we got a problem. And I'm like, well, why is that? There was a time I was sharing this with my wife not too long ago. We could talk about sports. We would bring out stats and say, well, your team didn't do this and my team did this. And then at the end of the day, we would realize, guess what? Neither one of us are getting paid off of this. So we would just say, let's go in and let's go grab something to eat. But now it's this thing where people are so sensitive
Yeah.
about the differences of things, that if I even think just differently about, just again, a sports game or about music or about a movie, then it's like, I think that's what has caused the change a little bit. And so for older people where we didn't grow up like that, it's different. It's different. So now I think the generation today, it's a little bit more soft on some areas where they need to be firmer on things. And they'll look sometimes at old school and say, well, that doesn't work anymore. That's antiquated. But no, it's the changing of the mindset. When you started out earlier, the mindsets on some things has changed, and it's made people think that the older way of things is not, there's no value in it anymore. And that's not true.
You know,
There's some things that my parents taught me that I didn't get then, but I understand now. There's certain things that my pastors have taught me that I didn't understand then, but I understand now, because it's just being receptive to what is being said to me. You can't take everything that everyone's given to you, but the people that are there that really are meeting you well, they're there trying to pour into you the right things. And now we have so many people pouring into people that there's just a lot of tainting in the water that's out here right now. A lot of
well,
tainting.
well, that is true, and I'm more so aligned with the old-fashioned way of thinking because, as you mentioned, a lot of this generation, we are much softer than the previous generation, and a lot of guys who do like motivational speaking would talk about it, that this generation, as soon as they are challenged, they're quick to give up. As soon as something doesn't go as planned, they quit to think they're not capable, and stuff like that. So the previous generation would push through the challenges. We have people today that will push through the challenges, but you find, as you mentioned, that, and this have been talked about a lot, where people become so sensitive if they have opposition with a certain
Right,
point.
right.
And sometimes, we have to allow people to share their own opinion without feeling offended, with
Exactly.
their own opinions and stuff like that, because they're going to have opinion. And so in regards to, as you mentioned, to change the narrative,
Mhm.
we have to really take control of, what we want to change and where we want to go. And I believe that is really important when it comes to changing the narrative. But you said something that I really wanted to get back on, which is accountability, not really accountability, but being consistent. when it comes to change in the narrative. Um,
Mhm.
do you see more of like this generation being less consistent in the change? Suppose they decide that they want to see change, and they would start, and then if change doesn't happen or something is given to them that pacifies the opinion, they stop. How do you look at that?
I think yes, I do see that because, I think going back to something we talked about earlier, there's a lot of passes being given,
Okay.
and you hit it really, really on the head very well. That if I get any opposition, it's like I got to throw my hands up. Any opposition, it's like no, let's go and cancel people. Let's go do all this stuff that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think to me, one of the things that I just find fascinating. Is the fact that there are people that have so many different interests. Like if whatever you're passionate about, it just for me, I love higher ed, love education. But you could have an engineer, again, as we talked earlier, you could be a mechanic, you could be into computers, be into sports. God put us all here to really be a blessing to one another
Yeah.
and to really understand that I need you. This thing sometimes of people sometimes looking down without saying that they're looking down because they may not make the same money or they may not have the education. No, no, that people really miss that. The reality of it is guess what? If I'm in a position, going back to your question earlier, again, what kind of impact am I going to make? Anyone can make an impact, and regardless of the role, regardless if you understand just the task that you be given. Again, if you're a father, if you are a husband, you're a brother, a grandfather, a pop, whatever, you have that ability. And I think what this generation has, unfortunately, there's sometimes not a lot of great examples, or they just don't want to hear from them. But we still, even with that, we've got to be consistent. If because for the 20 that may not be paying attention, there's that one that's probably watching from across the street that may never come to us and say anything, but they're watching how we're opening the door for our wives. They're watching how we're interacting with our children. Sometimes going to the store, we run into people, we may only see them that one time, but how are we? Now, let's keep it real. Life happens to all of us. We have good days and bad days, but I'm talking about being consistent. How am I in my home? Am I taking care of my wife? Am I taking care of my sons, my daughter? What do they see? Because the reality, if I want to make the change, it's got to someone start here. So I got to teach them by the example that I'm showing. How am I with my friends? It's just a lot of different things that this generation, it's a lot more cloning that we're doing instead of it's okay to be an individual. It's
Yeah.
okay. And be proud about the fact that you're not a cookie cutter, you're not like someone else.
That
I
is
hope
so.
that answers your question.
No, yeah, it does, because I think we need to, whatever we're trying to do or doing, we need to be consistent and be the example. And as one person asked me a few years ago, even before I was thinking about where I'm going to really dedicate my time and effort to make an impact, the person asked me, well, he said to me, will the real Richard Cross stand up? So I was like, man, what are you talking about? This was an older gentleman. I said, what are you talking about? And then he explained to me, he said, the person you are right here should be the person you are wherever you go. So you don't pretend here or you act out of character here and then you go somewhere else to act as if that's not who you are. So you need to be you and be the
Mhm.
person that you're trying to be where you are everywhere.
Can I share just a brief story? It's funny you
Yeah.
say that. At a couple of jobs I've worked at in higher ed, and they do these disc profiles, right? They do these disc profiles, and I often say there's not one right way to do one right answer. So what always was amazing to me, if I did this disc profile, let's say University A,
Mhm.
and then I did it again at University B, it would always be the same. I would come home at one time, I told my wife this, that there's a part where there's a part in the evaluation where it would show how people are in their home, or how they were privately, and then how they are in the office. And sometimes people's evaluations would be different. So they were actually acting one way here and then one way different. And so mine would be the same. And I'm not boasting in this, but people would look at me almost strange, like, because I would say to people that I work with, what you see is what you get.
That's right.
And a lot of times people would say, they wouldn't say it, but in their mindset is like, oh, he's just saying that, he's just doing that. But then when those tests would come out, I'm like, no, it's pretty accurate how those things are. I'm not here trying to impress you. Yeah. I take what I do very seriously. And I would say that, and people just sometimes think that you're only saying that for the interview. No, I'm about time. I'm about trying to make sure I'm accountable to whatever the tasks are. If I fall short, I fall short. I've made excuses in the past. I've done, and so those types of things I'm saying is that no, what you see is what you get. So I love that someone cared enough to ask that, to tell you that, because the reality of it is we even have to even say that to ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
Let me look in the mirror. Like you said, let me look in the mirror. Am I being real? Because people talk about keeping it real, but am I being real? Am I doing that? So well, I love it.
Yeah. Because when the person asked me, I think I just recently graduated with my undergrad.
Okay.
And we were just there talking because I saw him in one of those cafe place.
Okay.
I was grabbing a coffee and I was like, man, and he just started talking, and then he asked me the question. Maybe, and I often reflect on that question because then I didn't really know, as I said, where I was going to go or what I was going to really dedicate myself to. But as I go on my journey, very often I reflect on that question. Am I being what I'm sharing? And because it's important, as we navigate this journey, as we go on this journey, especially when we're talking about making an impact and being a great example for others. I'm not going to say I'm the best at what I do, but it's important that we model what we're trying to reach. As one of my colleagues gave me the pin, as you mentioned, be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're that every day. And that leads me to my next question. I know you have been in education for over 20 years. So what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
People that have inspired me on the path to be on, I would say my parents have really inspired me. My sister, she's been in education for a little bit, even though my dad and my sister, they're pharmacists. I have a lot of pharmacists in my family, but I would say it's my parents, my family. Then I would go on to even say my relationship with Jesus Christ really inspires everything, right? It's the foundation of who I am. And with that, my relationship with my pastors, with my wife, you've heard me talk about my children, my church family, have all been supportive of me in this role in higher ed. And over the years, God has blessed me to be able to work with some amazing people that even if I'm not at the same institutions, I literally still keep in contact. Literally over the weekend, someone just reached out to me, someone I used to manage, and she was excited because she got a new position. And so it's those type of things. Sometimes I'll just reach out to just older colleagues and just say, hey, how you doing? But the foundation, it started with my parents, with my sister. And then as I got older and got wiser, God saved me. I understood that, again, he's my Lord and Savior. And then it was just putting everything together. I have such a wonderful support system that I really am thankful for it, because I know I'm not deserving of it. That's the thing I understand. I know I'm not deserving of it.
Man, and that's awesome. And it's good to have some great influence and people that we can rely on when it comes to the path that we're on. But let me ask this question. What
Sure.
was education your first choice? Did you have other things that you'd want to pursue outside of education?
Very good question. So actually, when I started in undergrad, I went to Morgan for my undergrad and also for my master's program. And so when I started, I was a communications major. Telecommunications, what they called it at the time. Now it's global journalism. And so I worked actually at Morgan's radio station for some time. And so when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh, I know you got the voice to be on radio." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I was behind the scenes. I was more on the business side, but it was radio." And so I've always loved media, loved communication. So I started out in that. And then from the time I left Morgan Station, I then went to work for a medical publishing firm. And the part that was cool about that is that I then remember I said earlier that I have a lot of my dad is a retired pharmacist, my sister's a pharmacist, my godfather's a pharmacist, and so I was able to then to sell reprint articles to pharmaceutical companies. So I wasn't going to be a pharmacist, but I started to sell articles to pharmaceutical companies, and then I moved from that job into an advising job at an institution. And I thought at the time it was going to be like a transition job. I said, okay, I'll be here and then I'll get back into doing some more communications things. And lo and behold, it was there that I was like, oh, this is really cool. I got a chance to talk to prospective students about enrolling them into degree programs. And from that part, it was education from there. But I started out in radio and started out in communications. So
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Sometimes it's just great to gain the perspective because not everyone that end up in the classroom
mhm,
started out wanting to, but once they got introduced to the classroom and realized the impact that they can have,
mhm,
especially on students, they just fell in love with the classroom itself, but more so to inspire and impact the students. So, that's great to hear because
mhm.
that's how, just because it can be an inspiration to other Black men out there who may think that, oh, I didn't start my journey wanting to be in education, but it's possible to be in education and stuff like that.
Yeah, let me tell you, it took me, and I'll say this with my doctoral journey, it took me 6 years to
Wow.
graduate, 6 years. And I was going full time, working full time, still attending all my church services, still family, still taking care of all of that. And so I would say to people, and I say it to people now, I'm like, guess what? Anyone could do a doctoral degree if you have the right, again, your first question, mindset,
Yeah.
having the right support system. But I share that with people because sometimes they're like, I've talked to students and they may be on their 10th year. Maybe they're the 12th year. And guess what? Life happens. So sometimes you may have to take a break for whatever the reasons may be. And I'm like, no, don't give up. Keep going. And so when you talk about an impact, the things that we go through in our lives are for us to learn.
Correct.
But then, as I was sharing earlier, it's for us to then go back and share with other people to say, guess what? Don't think of yourself as a failure if it's taking you longer to do a degree program or taking you longer to accomplish whatever goal. No, let's keep going. And that's, again, changing. I love your question, changing the mindset. No, I can't keep going. And I'm not competing against you. I'm competing against myself to
Correct.
outdo where I am. So,
I think that's a great perspective because we challenges do happen and we
mm,
can't afford to give up. We can stop,
exactly.
we can rest, but we should not give up on what we want to achieve. I think that is important and a great reminder to all of us. Once we decide to do something, let's see it through, even though it may come with challenges, disappointments, and
Mhm.
setbacks. But we need to challenge ourselves to push through so we can achieve the goals that we have for ourselves. And that leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Um, excuse me. And I hope this makes sense. I still think we're a little bit misunderstood. I think we're a little bit misunderstood. I think we are misunderstood in the sense that there are times that I think people would still may think that they cookie cut us, that we're all the same. That's not true. I think that we're not, and sometimes it could be more of a cultural thing, but we're not, I don't want to say we're not as valued because I don't believe that, but I think we're just not fully understood to the potential that we have and that we can ascribe to be.
Correct.
And I think we have to be. be okay, as I shared earlier, being individuals. I think that there's this, some time ago, there was this thought that, and you don't hear it about as much, but okay, if a black man was walking down the street and a person of a different race is coming down, they may cross the street because they just don't understand you. But here now, we don't have that excuse. We have black men that are judges,
Mhm.
again, medical doctors, lawyers, and I think that we're still not understood who we are as people.
Yeah.
Those are our professions, right?
Mhm.
But who we are as people, the things that we go through, the journeys that we've been on, the different things that we've experienced. I don't think that it's really been understood to the degree that you may think that it is in 2024. I don't think that we're fully understood as who we are as people, not the professions, but the people, the people that we are.
Well, I think that's a really valuable point. And I think not just from other people perspective, but
Mhm.
I think we also, as Black men, have been conditioned to really see ourselves in a lesser light. Although, as you mentioned, that there are Black men out there who have done great things, have achieved great success, and and are at the top of their field, because there are Black men who are, say, over 50 years old, right? Who would
Mhm.
say they wouldn't think that they would ever see a Black president in the United States. So we
Mhm.
can reach have high accomplishments, right?
Mhm.
But I think, as you mentioned, I think we have been conditioned to see ourselves in a lesser light. And I think that really affects us. And it also where society may see us based on how we have been portrayed
Mhm.
in a broader sense. And that really caused people to look at us Black men in a lesser light. But what I've come to understand when it comes to us as Black men, right, or come to growth in our community, being that we are the most valuable asset. Human beings are the most valuable assets to
Mhm.
one's community. So I believe, even though there are some suppression, and when it comes to us as Black men, I think more opportunities need to be created. So as Black men, we can contribute as much as possible to our community, our communities, because once we are able to contribute, we will see more progress within our community. And I also think that as Black men, we sometimes are unaware of our own greatness. And that is
I agree with
something
that.
that we have to be reminded of very often. I do believe, because I do talk to Black men, right? And if they should, even though they are qualified, they may still have this
Mhm.
imposter syndrome going in those
Yep.
spaces because of how society have been conditioned or conditioned us to think about ourselves.
I think that's a really good point. One of the things that I strive to do with my sons, I do with friends of mine, is just to tell them I love them. Tell them I love them. They need to hear that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So when you talk about going, we talked earlier about just being a mentor and again just letting them know how special that they are. I sometimes will text a friend of mine, friends from college, come on my mind. Hey, I just want to let you know I love you, and they'll text back I love you too. This is Black men to Black men. And that's sometimes we talk about vulnerability. We don't always do that, but sometimes we need to let other men know, hey, guess what? I love you. That and I love the man you're becoming. I love what I see God doing in you. I love. I just love that you're in my life. It's things like that that we should be okay to say because guess what? We need that because that's that support, that push that will to let me know. Okay, guess what? I can keep going because I see you seeing in me. I see you, you see me, and I see you. Let's keep doing this together. Let's get on this journey and let's keep moving together.
Man, that is so powerful right there, and a great reminder to all of us on the journey. I think that is something that needs to be happening more often.
Mhm.
And tell you, since I started doing these conversations, right, I realized that more Black men out there want to talk about some of the things that they're doing and what they think we need to do. And they would
Mhm.
also talk about, conversations like this is very therapeutic. So I realize how important, because sometimes, you may be over here and now you realize that, oh, when we connect with each other and we are reminded of our value, it really empowers you to keep pressing forward. As you mentioned, we can call up our brothers and say, "Man, I love you, and you are doing great." And I think
Mhm.
that is really encouraging. And I've heard so many good feedback from just starting this conversation and having conversation with Black men who are doing the work, who are out there on the field, because sometimes Black men are not always being acknowledged for what they're
Mhm.
doing. And we think we have to be in a certain status or have certain
Right.
credential to be acknowledged. And I think we have to realize that wherever you are and whatever goal, whatever impact you're making, it is still valuable. Whatever your contribution is, it is still valuable. And we have to realize how important it is to really edify those who are doing the work, despite what work they're doing, to make a difference, because their difference still makes a difference.
Mhm. I agree with that.
Yeah, and so I'm going to go into my next question. What
Sure.
change do you want to see in general when it comes amongst Black men? What change do you want to
I
see?
think it goes back.
No, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry because there was a breakup in the feed here, but I think it goes back to what I was sharing earlier. I think we need to get back to respecting differences of opinion, and that's something that I would really like to see change. Is getting back to respecting your viewpoint and listening and talking about what that why do you think the way that you do, why how did you come to that conclusion, instead of just saying, oh, you don't think like me and that's it. No, we need to get back to that level of respect, because we may find that it allow us to know a little bit more about the person we're speaking, and not just, again, putting everybody in this box. I think that's what I miss, going back before, where we could sit back and not say, well, let's just the whole side of, like, I'm looking out my window, everyone on the other side of the street has to think the same way as me. No, they don't. And it's okay. But find out why I'm thinking, and not just shut me down because I may like this and you don't. Let's have that discussion. And then there we can be more understanding of why we think the way that we do. But now that's been gone. And I would love to see that come back.
Yeah, I think that that's important. And again, that's a valuable point, because for us to really move forward, it's going to take a collective group of individuals who are able to work together despite differences, despite difference of opinions. So I think that is really important. If we're thinking about moving the needle forward, if we're thinking about making a positive impact, we have to
Mhm.
be able to work together as a collective group of people, because that's how we're going to make progress. And unity is strength. And with strength, we will have power. And with power, we will have the change that we want to see. Because without the power, we ain't going to have the change that we want to see, because we may see what we're doing, but it's how serious others is going to take us when it comes to the change. It's not just what we are doing, but when we have the power, they will take us more seriously. And I think that is important when we are talking about creating change. And that's where, as a collective group of people, it's important that we're able to work together in on the goals that we want to accomplish. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. And that leads me to this question. What was a pivotal moment in your life?
It's a couple. The main one I would say that they sort of go together. I think when I found out I was going to be a father, that that changed my life completely. And being at that time I was a single father, that changed my life, because at that time it was like, okay, I've got to really man up now. It's no longer about me. I can't play any more games. It was like I knew I was not going to be a statistic. I was not going to be one of those people that you read about. Oh, they just out here sowing seeds and no. Mm-mm. And it was because of that back, he's 22 now, that it caused me to realize, okay, I needed to get my life right with God. So I tell him all this. I don't tell him all the time. I used to say to him, I was like, he's the reason that allowed me to realize I needed a savior. It was because of him. And that changed my whole world, because everything was going so great. And then I got a call and it was, whoa, changed my world, changed my world. But but God knew I needed to be changed, because if not, I wasn't thinking about God. I was doing my own thing. But it slowed me down to realize, okay, guess what? I need to be that father that my dad was to me. And I needed to make sure that I was doing what I needed, what this child needed to, he needed a father, and I needed to step up. And so that was the pivotal point of my life, was having my son.
I think kids do create change for a lot of people, because, as you mentioned, that now you have to take responsibility, not just for yourself, but for a child. And being that you had a great example of a father, and you know that you want to be there, you will have to do things differently. So it happens a lot of times, and that's for a lot of people. That helps them to make the right decisions, as they go forward, having that responsibility and be willing to take care of the responsibility. I think that really give people perspective and say, you know what, no, I can't just continue to live the way that I've been living. Now I have to be able to take
Mhm.
responsibility going forward. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it resonates with a lot of people, with when it comes to them being their best self and to get back on track to be the best that they can be. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Mhm.
So that leads me
You're welcome.
to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
I think the life lesson I learned late is that you're more than your job. A few years ago, I got let go from a job that I had been working for several years, and I prided myself on trying to do the right thing, to being the example that I thought was necessary to build teams and things like that. But it didn't go along with the vision that management at that time had, and they let me go. And it messed with my head a little bit, because I had never been fired from a job before. And then also, I kept hearing things about my performance. You're not meeting expectations. You're not doing this. All the things that were working well suddenly changed, and I hadn't really changed so much of the day to day. But what it was is that I didn't play the game, and the game is you gotta the political game at work. I didn't play that. I came to work, did my own job, and left. And that threw people off a little bit, because it's like, oh, I was considered to be standoffish, and that really wasn't the case. But nonetheless, I lost my job. And so it messed with my head, and then it messed with my head to the point where I didn't apply for positions that I just felt that I wasn't worthy enough to apply for certain positions. And my pastors had to say some things. My wife had to say some things to me. And let me go back about that example earlier too. I had gotten complacent at the job that I was at. I want to put that out there. I got complacent. But what God had to tell me is that he was taking such good care of me that it wasn't the job. I used to think that. So I went and worked at other places, and then would lose jobs because budgeting, sometimes they would be budgets happen, and then they would have to move my position. And then it got easier. So the first time I was like panicking. I'm like, I have a wife, I have children, and I've got to take care of all those things. And then as it happened a couple of other times, it was like, oh, God's got this. But I had to learn that I was more than the job, because your first question, which I love, is you wanted me to talk about myself. And a lot of times we as people, we sometimes can lead with what we do.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that. Oh, I'm the director of graduate professional development. I get it. But that's what I do. Who I really am is the husband, the father, the child of God. That's who I am. And so I had to learn that I'm more than a job. Because guess what? Jobs come and go.
Correct.
But those positions, those responsibilities that I have, they change as we get older, but they're still the same. And that's really where the value is being that husband, that father, that Christian. That's what matters, not so much the job. Yes, we got to take care of ourselves, but it's not that. And I had to learn that later in life. And it's been very liberating understanding that.
And I really appreciate you sharing that experience, especially the part that you have been doing the work, and yet the same work that you have been doing, they start to find fault. But the point that I really resonate with is that you mentioned that because you weren't playing politics. And I think that happens to a lot of us as Black men in this workplace. If you want to stay true to your character and your values, and your character and values are not in alignment with what's going on, you sometimes are the ones that start to feel the pressure. Either they start to hold back on what resources that you need to get. So
Yeah.
your job is not as easy as it used to be, to get you frustrated. And I think as Black men, we do experience things like that, because when I was doing this research earlier, last year on upward mobility, you'd think that as a Black male in a work environment, you think your strong work ethic, you think your education, you think all of those things that we all have been told, these are the things that we need to do to make the progress. But yet we go into spaces that sometimes don't value the hard work, don't value the character, don't value all the things that will make you a great worker, because you're not playing politics.
I love that you said that, because Dr. Cross, I allow people to get in my head. And it's funny. I would say to my wife, here it is. I would say I wasn't out here committing adultery. I take care of my family. It's the things. Now, let me say, not without mistakes, because we make mistakes.
Yes.
But I'm not cheating. I come to work on time, and I allow people to get in my head. And so the thing about it is that it really messed me up, because to your point, you can step back later and see the plan. I got put on a performance improvement plan. I got all kinds of things and I said to the people at the job, I said to HR at the job at the time, I said, you know what, at that time, and I don't know how it is now at this particular place, but I said, it's easier for a Black woman to move up in this company. I said, if it's a Black male, they could probably get to being a manager, but a director or anything, nah, that won't happen. Now, there were some, but when I say some, it was like 1, 2. If you're a Black female, it was different. And so it's to your point. Then it was things changed, and it was almost to make things hard. And at that time, I had been the longest tenured person working there. Wow. So that was almost to be an example. And I remember saying this. I said, listen, if they ever let me go, because I sort of saw the patterns coming, I said, you're going to have to try to explain to the people, because it's not going to make sense, because they're going to sit back and say, well, man, you let him go? And so lo and behold, that's what I found out later. It's one of those things where, again, I allow people to get in my head, to make me think that the job I was doing wasn't good, and it messed me up. But I've since changed that. I'm never going to allow that to happen again. So to the people watching, don't let people get in your head with the wrong thing when you know what you're doing is correct. Take constructive criticism by all means, but not to the point where people are twisting it to make it seem like you're doing something wrong. Don't fall for that.
Man, that is so a great point, because I've talked to Black men who have dealt with situations like that. I've been in environments where, they are doing the work. And I myself have been in those situations where you have been doing the work, you're getting all the good reports and stuff like that. And then you realize that what suddenly changed. But then you realize, when you really take a deeper look, you realize politics involved. And if your values are different, not to say you have bad values, right? You have the values to do the work, to make a difference. You're there for the right reason. but being that you're not on the same page with everyone else, sometimes you are looked at differently, because if you're not able to be being controlled, there are other things that they're going to do to maybe sabotage you. And I think as Black men, we need to understand that, but also not just only understand, we should not allow ourselves, especially when we're in leadership role, to use that power to sabotage others, because we have to be there to help hold each other up,
Yeah.
and so we can move forward together stronger. So that's something that we have to become really cognizant of,
Excuse me.
because we should not participate in tearing down another person on a whole, but especially our own Black counterpart. Because if we're going to progress, we need each other to progress, and we need the strength
Exactly.
and unity to progress, so we can make the progress that we need to make, so things can be better for the next generation coming behind
Sure.
us. All right. So that leads me to my next question, and my question before my final question.
Okay.
Where can the listeners find you and support you and the work that you're doing to make a difference?
Actually, I can be found on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually how we connected, and so I had to go back and look at it because it's not long. So I'm gonna try to make it as short as possible, right? So it's, if you go to LinkedIn, it's / Dr. Kevin Bradley. And there I post a lot of at times about the different workshops that we have at Morgan for our grad students. You could also email me at kevinbra@msn.com. MSN, an older email address there, but yes, I still use it. It still works great. But there, you can reach out to me as well. I also provide editing resources for dissertation students and for master students as well. But you can certainly, if anyone needs any type of assistance, just even talking about grad school, and not even necessarily Morgan, just, hey, you're thinking about going to grad school, or even thinking about, I've worked in continuing and professional studies. I've worked with undergrad students, so you could always email me as well. I would love to communicate.
Oh man, that's great. And I will put the link in the description, so
Okay.
those who want to connect with you can connect with you to learn more about what you're doing, especially being that you do edits for dissertations. And there are people out there currently who are doing their dissertations and may need that editorial services. So they can reach out to you via the description. In the description, I'll put your contact so they
Okay.
can
I
connect with
appreciate
you
that.
for that service if they do need it. All right. So my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
That's a really good question. I think for me, on the world is to really make sure that I am being the example that God wants me to be, and that's the impact that I want to make on the world. Again, if God, he has called me, he's chosen me, he's allowed me to be in this higher education space, he's allowed me to be a father, allowed me to be a husband, and all these other different roles. But I want to make sure that I am doing what he is expecting of me to do. And if I fall short, let me quickly repent, get it right, and get it moving back in the direction of where I need to be. Because that's where the change come from. People need to be able to see people that look like us, but also, again, being flat-footed, not thinking that I am more than what I am. I'm not. I'm not. And not to take myself so seriously that, oh yeah, I have a doctorate. I'm just, no, we're all really the same. We're different areas, but the reality of it is I need to be flat-footed so that I can reach people and so that I can see, we have to have the human relatability in order to make that impact. I can't make the impact if my head is through the roof. Can't do it.
And I appreciate that. Um, Being the example and being relatable, I think that is important as we navigate this journey of life, especially when we are thinking about making an impact. Being the help, our support, our guide for other people, being able to allow ourselves to be relatable. I think that is important, because sometimes we can use our degrees to our positions to think that we are better. But as you mentioned, which is a great reminder to all of us, that the positions, the degrees, they are just things. Because one, we may not be able to lose the degrees, but we can lose the positions. But we have to understand that we have to connect with people regardless of their social status. And if we're here to do servant work, connecting with people regardless of their status is important. Because again, God afford us an opportunity to be in the position that we are in. So I think it's now our responsibility to help other people, because who to say, we may not, we didn't have to be in this position, because we see people out here who are not in the position that we're in. So we have to be very grateful for the position. Yes, we may have put in the work to get there, but there are people out there putting in the work, but still don't really get there. So we have to be really appreciative of where we are and what we are able to accomplish. So, but Dr. Bradley, man, this is great. I can't believe the time I've gone so far in, but the conversation is great. I really appreciate
I
you
appreciate
coming
that.
on, the Black Male Impact, to share your thoughts and knowledge and perspective and insights with all of us. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. And I just want to say this before we end. I really want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I've had a chance to look at some of the videos and some of the other interviews that you've had, and they've been phenomenal. And I want to just encourage you to keep pressing forward and to keep bringing this type of forum together and allowing us to be able to share just the insights that we have, because just watching other people, that could just encourage someone to say, you know what, I can do it. If they're able to do it, I can do it as well. So I just want to encourage you as well. I really appreciate you reaching out and allowing me to be here. It really has been an honor. I have enjoyed the time, and I'm looking too. I'm like, we've been talking for a minute, but I've enjoyed it. So
Yes,
thank you
sir.
very much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. And thank you. I really appreciate the encouragement, because to do the work, we need the encouragement. It doesn't matter how, I like to tell people, they see me and they say, man, you're motivated. You're doing this thing every day. How do you do it? But very often, I will get a message from somebody sending me an inbox and say, man, keep going. I love the work that you're doing. And, sometimes you at the point where you really needed it. It's not that you need it every time you get it, but sometimes you get it when you actually needs it to continue to press forward. So I really appreciate the encouragement, because I've received so many good feedback just for doing this. And, it is something that I think needs to be done, and we need to give ourselves a voice. And so other people can see what we're doing. As the next generation, it's easier for them to become what they see. And the more they see us, the more they realize what they can become. So I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can, do this. And so I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yes. And listeners, again, thanks for being here with us. It's a pleasure. And please continue to support us in whatever way possible, as the goal is to bring guests that we believe will be beneficial to all of us whilst we continue on this journey. Thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact, as the goal is to create and support and just to make an impact. And that's the goal. We want to make a positive impact. So thanks again for being here with us as we continue on this journey.